You have to understand that our relationship had ceased to be a family bond years ago. It was a business arrangement, and I was the silent investor who never saw a return. The ledger of their neglect was long, and every entry was written in red ink. I remember clearly the day I realized my role. I was 16. I had spent 2 summers mowing lawns and babysitting to save up for a used Honda Civic. I was proud of that car. It represented freedom. It represented a way to get away from the house where I felt invisible. But 3 weeks after I bought it, Chloe, who was 18 and had just lost her license for speeding, took my keys without asking. She didn't make it out of the subdivision. She wrapped my Honda around a light pole because she was trying to take a selfie while driving. When I came home to the flashing lights of the tow truck, I expected my parents to be furious with her. Instead, my mother was comforting Chloe, who was sobbing about how the airbag had bruised her collarbone right before a photo shoot. My father pulled me aside. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't promise to replace my car. He told me that reporting this to the insurance company would skyrocket their premiums. He said that since it was my car, it was technically my responsibility. I ended up paying for the repairs to the light pole and the towing fees out of my college fund. They spun it as a lesson in responsibility for me, while Chloe got a brand new lease a month later because she needed a reliable vehicle for her image. That was the pattern. I paid the price. Chloe got the prize. It happened again at my college graduation. I walked across the stage scanning the crowd for Vincent and Natalie. I had sent them the date months in advance. I had reserved the tickets, but the seats were empty. Later, I got a text from my dad. Chloe had a crisis. A crisis meant she had broken a nail and was having a panic attack before a local beauty pageant. They had turned the car around on the highway to go comfort her. I ate dinner alone that night in my cap and gown, realizing that to them, my milestones were inconveniences, while Chloe's minor inconveniences were national emergencies. So when they came back from Bora Bora 2 weeks after skipping my wedding, I wasn't surprised they didn't call to apologize. I found out through the grapevine social media is a small town that the trip hadn't gone as planned. The big brand sponsorship Chloe had bragged about, it fell through. The company pulled out at the last minute because her engagement numbers were dropping. That meant Vincent and Natalie were on the hook for the first-class flights, the overwater bungalow, the private boat charters. They had put it all on credit banking on the sponsorship check to clear the balance. Now they were back in Scottsdale, tanned, broke, and desperate. They needed liquidity and in the corporate structure of our dysfunctional family. When the star asset is failing, you liquidate the backup assets. That was me. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a savings bond, and they were ready to cash in. The phone rang on a Tuesday evening. It was Vincent. I put it on speaker so Logan could hear. I expected a guilt trip about blocking them on social media. I expected them to play the victim, but my father's voice was crisp, businesslike. The tone he used when he was trying to close a deal, he knew was shaky. "Olivia, we need to talk about fairness," he said. He didn't mention the wedding. He didn't mention the empty chairs. He went straight to the numbers. He told me that he and Natalie had been doing a financial audit of the last decade. He said that raising 2 daughters was expensive, and upon reviewing their records, they felt there was a significant imbalance in how their resources had been allocated. I almost laughed. I thought he was finally admitting they had spent everything on Chloe, but then he pivoted. He said, "We have calculated the costs of your upbringing that went above and beyond the standard duty of care, the braces, the car repairs, the living expenses during your gap year. It comes to a total of $48,500. Since Chloe is currently going through a professional transition and you are established in your career, we expect you to reimburse the family trust for that amount." The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the quiet. $48,500. It was a specific number. It wasn't a round figure pulled from thin air. It sounded calculated. I felt the heat rising in my throat, the urge to scream, to list every time I had paid my own way, every time I had bailed them out. But Logan reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His grip was firm. He shook his head, signaling me to stay silent. Logan is a forensic accountant. He deals with fraud, embezzlement, and liars for a living. He doesn't get angry. He gets curious. I took a breath and asked, "You want me to pay you back for raising me?" "Consider it a retroactive parenting reimbursement," Vincent said, smooth as silk. "We are prepared to set up a payment plan if you can't manage the lump sum, but we need the first installment by Friday." I hung up without saying yes or no. I just sat there staring at the phone, feeling dirty. Logan broke the silence. He didn't look shocked. He looked like he was solving a puzzle. "This is the sunk cost trap, Olivia," he said, his voice calm and factual. I looked at him confused. He explained, "In economics, a sunk cost is money you have already spent and can't get back. Smart investors cut their losses, but desperate investors, they keep pouring money into the failing asset, hoping it will turn around. Your parents have invested everything, their money, their ego, their reputation, into Chloe. She is their failing stock. She is tanking, and she is taking them down with her." He pointed at the phone. "They know you are stable. You are the high-yield bond they ignored. Now that they are hemorrhaging cash, they are trying to liquidate you to keep her afloat. They don't think they owe you an apology because in their minds, you are property. You are just an asset to be sold to cover their bad bet." He stood up and walked to his home office, cracking his knuckles. "But 48,500 is a very specific number," he said, turning back to me with a look I hadn't seen before. A predator's look. "People like your father usually round up to 50,000. The fact that it is that precise means it corresponds to a real debt. They aren't asking for reimbursement, Olivia. They are asking you to pay off a specific bill, and I am going to find out exactly what it is." My first instinct was to burn the bridge down with a flamethrower of angry texts. I wanted to scream at my father to list every time I had paid for my own textbooks, my own clothes, my own life. I wanted to remind him that I was on a full academic scholarship during the years he claimed to be supporting me. But Logan stopped me. He put a hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding. "Do not get mad," he said, his voice level. "Get the data. Anger is just noise to people like them. Evidence is leverage." We sent a simple email back. No emotion, no defense, just one line. "Please send an itemized list of the expenses totaling $48,500 so we can review the claim." They sent it within the hour. That was the first red flag. It was too ready. It was a spreadsheet attached to an email with the subject line, "Family Obligations." Logan sat at his desk, dual monitors glowing in the dim light. He cracked his neck and went to work. I sat in the chair behind him, watching him dissect my life. He didn't look at it like a husband. He looked at it like an auditor. He crossed reference dates. He pulled up old bank statements I kept in the cloud. "This is sloppy," he muttered, pointing at the screen. "Look here. They listed $4,000 for living expenses in September of 2015. I squinted at the date. I was a sophomore. I was living in the dorms as a resident advisor. My room and board were free. I didn't cost them a dime that semester. Logan kept scrolling. And here, dental work 2016. You were on your own insurance plan through the university job by then. He spun his chair around to face me. "Olivia, these aren't reimbursements. The dates don't match your life, but they do match something else." He pulled up a window on the other screen. It was Chloe's old Instagram feed. He had scrolled back years. "September 2015, he said, pointing to a photo of Chloe posing with a designer handbag in Paris. Dental work 2016 that matches the week Chloe posted about getting veneers before her first pageant. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. They weren't asking me to pay them back for raising me. They were asking me to retroactively pay for Chloe's lifestyle. They had kept the receipts for her luxury life and were now trying to bill them to my account. But then Logan stopped. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. His face went hard. "Wait," he said. "The total $48,500. It is too exact to be just a random sum of Chloe's expenses. Why that number?" He opened a new tab. "I am going to pull your full credit history, Olivia, not the consumer report you see on the banking app. the deep dive, the one that shows everything attached to your social security number since birth. The room was silent for 3 minutes. The only sound was the clicking of his mouse. Then he stopped. He let out a long, slow breath. "They didn't just bill you, Olivia," he whispered. "They stole you." He turned the screen toward me. There, listed in black and white, were 3 credit cards I had never seen. One opened when I was 17, 2 more when I was 18. All of them maxed out. All of them currently in default and racking up massive interest. The total outstanding balance, $48,500. Vincent and Natalie hadn't just asked for a loan, they had committed identity theft. They had used my minor social security number to fund Chloe's early career, maxed out the cards, and ignored them until the collections agency started calling. Now that they were broke from the Bora Bora trip, they couldn't make the minimum payments anymore. They needed me to pay the reimbursement so they could pay off the fraud they committed in my name before I found out. I stared at the screen. The betrayal wasn't emotional anymore. It was criminal. We invited them over the next evening. I told them we had the check ready. Logan coached me for an hour before they arrived. He introduced me to a psychological tactic called the gray rock method. He explained that narcissists feed on reaction. If I screamed, I gave them fuel. If I cried, I gave them satisfaction. To win, I had to become a gray rock, boring, unyielding, and utterly impenetrable. I had to remove the emotional hook so they had nothing to grab onto. When the doorbell rang, my heart hammered against my ribs, but my face was a mask of stone. I opened the door. Vincent and Natalie stood there looking smug. Chloe was with them, scrolling on her phone, looking bored as if extorting her sister was just another Tuesday errand. "We are glad you came to your senses, Olivia," Vincent said, walking past me without waiting for an invite. "Family supports family. It is the honorable thing to do." They sat at our dining table. Natalie looked around at our home, her eyes assessing the furniture, calculating its worth. I sat opposite them. Logan stood behind me, a silent sentinel. I didn't offer them coffee. I didn't ask how they were. I just folded my hands on the table. "Did you bring the check?" Chloe asked, finally looking up. "I have a vendor waiting on a deposit." I looked at her. I didn't feel the old sting of jealousy. I didn't feel the urge to please. I felt nothing. "There is no check," I said. My voice was flat, monotone. Vincent's face reddened instantly. "You said you had the money." "Do not play games with us, Olivia. We have legal avenues we can pursue if you refuse to pay your debts." That was the moment he threatened legal action. He walked right into the trap. I reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I slid it across the mahogany surface. It stopped right in front of my father's hands. "We have legal avenues, too," I said. Vincent frowned, confused. He opened the envelope. I watched his eyes scan the top document. It wasn't a check. It was a sworn fraud affidavit prepared by a notary that morning. Behind it was a draft of a police report for identity theft naming Vincent, Natalie, and Chloe as co-conspirators. And behind that, the full credit report Logan had pulled with the fraudulent dates highlighted in neon yellow. The color drained from Vincent's face. It happened instantly, like someone pulled a plug. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "We managed your finances when you were a minor. This was for your benefit." I didn't blink. I stayed in the gray rock state. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just stated the facts. "You opened credit lines in a minor's name." I said, "You maxed them out on luxury goods for Chloe. That is a federal crime. It carries a prison sentence of up to 15 years. Natalie snatched the papers from him. Her hands started shaking as she read. She looked at me, tears instantly welling up in her eyes, her go-to defense mechanism. "Olivia, please," she wailed. "We were drowning. We just needed a bridge. How could you do this to your own parents? We are family." I watched her cry. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but the audience had left the building. I stood up. Logan stepped forward, crossing his arms. "You have 24 hours," I said. "You will liquidate whatever assets you have left the boat, the club membership. I don't care. You will pay off every cent of those cards. If the balance isn't zero by tomorrow at 5 p.m., I file the report." Vincent stood up, trying to regain his height, his authority. "You wouldn't put your sister in jail. You wouldn't destroy this family over money." I looked him dead in the eye. "You destroyed the family when you chose to steal from one daughter to worship the other. And as for the money," I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "Don't contact me about trivial matters." I pointed to the door. "Get out." They didn't argue. They saw the look on Logan's face. They saw the phone in his hand, ready to dial. They scrambled out of the house like roaches when the lights turn on. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with victory. They made the deadline. Barely. At 4:45 p.m. the next day, Logan's phone pinged. He refreshed the credit report. The balances on all 3 fraudulent cards had dropped to 0, paid in full. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I just felt the heavy weight of a burden finally being set down. It was a transaction concluded, a contract terminated. The fallout in Scottsdale, however, was far messier than a simple bank transfer. You cannot liquidate a life in 24 hours without people noticing. To come up with nearly $50,000 in cash overnight, Vincent and Natalie had to fire everything that gave them their social identity. The 40F boat they used to impress clients sold to a used dealer for cash well under market value. The country club membership they had held for 30 years resigned and cashed out. In a town like ours, status is the only currency that matters, and they had just declared moral bankruptcy. The rumors started immediately. People whispered that Vincent was under investigation, that they were destitute, that they had gotten caught in a scheme. The invitations to galas stopped coming. The phone calls dried up. They were left alone in their big, empty house, surrounded by the echoes of the image they couldn't afford to maintain. But the final blow didn't come from the neighbors. It came from the monster they had created. 3 days after the confrontation, Chloe posted a video. I watched it from my burner account. She wasn't crying about her failed brand trip anymore. She was sitting in her car ring light on, looking somber. The title was "Breaking My Silence, Surviving Toxic Parents." She threw them to the wolves. To save her own brand, to explain why she wasn't living the high life anymore. She painted herself as the victim of their financial mismanagement. She claimed she had cut ties with them for her own mental health. She didn't mention the fraud. She didn't mention that she was the one who spent the money. She simply realized that the bank of mom and dad was closed, so she burned the bank down to get sympathy likes. It was poetic justice. They had sacrificed their relationship with me to worship her, and in the end, she cannibalized them for content. I closed the laptop and never looked at her page again. 1 year later, the air in my garden is different. It doesn't feel thin anymore. It feels full. I stood on the back porch this morning holding a mug of coffee, watching Logan kneel in the soil. He was staking out a new section of the yard. We aren't just planting roses this year. We are clearing a space for a swing set. I looked down at the blueprints on the table. It wasn't a landscape design. It was a plan for a nursery. For a long time, I was afraid to start a family. I was terrified that the rot in my DNA was inevitable, that I would inherit their coldness, their transactional view of love. But looking at Logan, looking at the life we built brick by brick, I realized something fundamental. Biology is an accident. Biology is just a shared set of chromosomes. But family is architecture. You choose the location, you pour the foundation, you select the materials, you decide who gets a key to the front door, and more importantly, you decide who is kept outside the gate. I am not a glass child anymore. I am solid. I am seen. And the family I am building now won't have to audit their worth to know they are loved. They will know it, because I will show up. I will be in the front row, and I will never ever look through them to see someone else.